How's everybody doing today? Y'all good? Y'all still up? It's not too late for y'all? Okay, so what I'm going to be speaking to you guys about today, obviously, is restoration, but I'm going to start with the service of restoration and what that means to me. I'm honored to stand in front of you all today, and I would like to thank Will, Anthony, Brian, and Sandra for inviting me here. My name is Syrita Steib-Martin, and I am the daughter of Sylvia, a retired judge who is currently in private practice, and Gerard, a retired petrochemical supervisor that adopted me at age 2. I have a 6-year-old son, Ethan. I'm a clinical laboratory scientist. I'm the executive director of Operation Restoration, a social justice organization that focuses on helping women and girls transition into society after incarceration through higher education specifically, and I also spent the ages of 19 to 29 in prison. I have always been non-traditional in the sense that I read the last page of a book first. I never use the definition listed number 1 in the dictionary. When learning definitions of the word, I always like to use the 4th or 5th definition. I don't know if I'm trying to seem like I'm more educated or if I'm just rebelling, but that's what I do. But I want to keep in line with my tradition of the non-traditional, and I want to talk to you about restoration and what that has meant to my life. I want to get past the traditional definition that you may associate with the word and skip straight to the 3rd definition of the word, the best definition, an unimpaired or improved condition. As a kid, I always remembering destroying perfectly fine things to see if I can improve them. So now I'm going to stop reading. I just wanted to make sure I got that out the way, and I'm just going to talk to you guys. So in order to tell you about my restoration and how I felt like that was achieved, I have to talk about where I felt like I was destroyed and where I had to turn and find within myself the ability to be able to return to an unimpaired condition. At the age of 3 was the first time I could, I guess, associate my experience with violence, if I can put it that way. I remember I was 3 and I was asleep and I heard loud voices raised in the hall, and I get up to go and see what's going on. And I remember my dad punching my pregnant, 8.5-month pregnant mom in her stomach. She was pregnant with my sister, so I see what's going on, I go back, and I get in bed, and I go to sleep. 4 was the first time that I experienced violence against myself, when a month later, my mom was coming home with my sister, and I'm asking, as kids do, hey, when's mom coming home, when she's bringing my new sister home? And then I get a whipping for asking those questions. So for me, very early on, I was always bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, very intelligent, but I felt like something had entered into my life that did not belong. So I had to learn at a very early age how to deal with violence against myself and my mom, and then also find a way to still be a child. I said I wasn't gonna cry. I listened to Drake before I came out. Didn't help. You know, Nice for What was the song I was listening to. And it still didn't help, so I apologize. But anyway, moving along. My grandmother and I were very close growing up. She died on February 11th, 1990. I was named after her, so this was like 2 days before my 10th birthday. And I felt like my grandmother was like my best friend. She was my protector, but she also suffered from mental health issues, and we were more like friends. So when she died, that was very upsetting for me. So February 11th became a day for me that just was synonymous with things, bad things, I guess, for me. At 12, I started skipping school, drinking. My mom and my dad were both working a lot, so I would get up, leave, go, catch the bus, or so they thought, and I would go back in the house, and I would have my friends over, 12 and 13-year-olds, and we were all, skipping school. In 1994, at 14, I was diagnosed with PTSD due to the violence that I had encountered in my home. January 1995, a guy who I thought was just my mom's friend was introduced to me as my biological father while driving me to, of all places, get some fried chicken from Junior Food Mart. I love to eat. I love, love, love to eat. So everybody knows the way to my heart is through my stomach. And he brought me to get me fried chicken, but then to tell me that he was my biological father. So for me, that was another incident or a defining moment, and I really didn't know what was going on in my life. And I didn't understand why all of these adults kept just dropping things into my lap and not telling me how to deal with it, how to work through it, how to figure it out. So for me, that was another really defining moment for me. February 11th, this date, 1995, was the first time I cried about my grandmother on the 5th anniversary of her death. Because when she died, I didn't cry. My mom was very, very upset. And at 10 or 11, I was used to being a little adult. So I didn't even shed a tear for about 5 years as it related to my grandmother's death. September 1999, I joined the U.S. Navy, and this put my PTSD in overdrive. I wish somebody would have talked to me and actually told me what boot camp was about, because that was not a good idea at all. It was not a good idea. So one of the petty officers whose cohort I was in, he actually, I don't know what I was thinking, but I had like a confession of the soul, probably revolved some type of candy or something he gave me. And I told him that he reminded me of my father. And when I did that, it was like everything that I had experienced growing up with my dad, he pounded even more upon me. So that was very, very, very hard for me to like cope in that 10-and-a-half-week boot camp. So even though I don't come from the normal socioeconomic background that you associate with people in prison, on February 11th, 2000, I was arrested and placed in jail. And this was 2.5 months after I graduated boot camp. So I know the million-dollar question is, what did she do to go to prison for like 10 years? What happened? So I'm just gonna lay it on you guys. I blew up a car dealership. So I don't know if y'all have ever seen Gone in 60 Seconds. Let's go get it out. So let me tell y'all how this happened. So I was 19. So you can understand the frame of mind that I was in at that time. And I had been drinking a lot, but this day I was sober. So probably if I had been drinking, it wouldn't have happened. I might have been a little rational, but that wasn't what happened that day. So we were stealing cars from a car dealership, and two of my co-defendants, just felt like their face was on the camera, and me being very scientific at the time, before I went to the military, my scholarship was in physics and engineering to Xavier University. So I was always really good in the lab, and so I walked out, and there was like this massive propane tank, and in my 19-year-old mind, I'm like, it would be really cool to just like set the propane tank on fire and just blow the place up. So I accidentally blew it up by making a line to the propane tank, and it just turned into this big explosion, right? So that's what happened with the car dealership. So because of this little heist, I was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, 20 years in state prison, and $1.9 million in restitution at the age of 19. So I couldn't wrap my mind around when I was sentenced what that looked like. I was 20 when I actually received my sentence, and the judge basically said you would not be released until you're 29 or 30 years old, right? So I couldn't see past 25. So for me, I did not understand like what that looked like. I couldn't wrap my mind around being in prison that long. I went to a place in Carswell, Texas, where every day, it was a medical facility as well, every day somebody was dying there. So there was an ambulance that was parked outside of the gate, and every day a body was rolled down on a gurney through the compound. So very early on, I associated, that I had to get out of this place because people don't survive this environment, right? And that led me on a path where I was shipped to a lot of different institutions across this country because I was just very angry while I was incarcerated. So in 2004, I got to another prison in Tallahassee, Florida, where I was able to start taking college classes again. And something happened to me. I was about to be 25 at this time, and it was like a light went off, and it was like, you absolutely cannot go back out into society the way that you came in. So I started taking these classes, and something interesting happened. I wanted to do better. I wanted to learn more about myself, what made me tick, learning how to self-actualize. I also just really had something that was holding me accountable and something to start working towards. So the minute I started taking college classes while I was incarcerated was the minute that I stopped getting in trouble while I was incarcerated, and my life just began to change. Now, while you're incarcerated, everything costs an exorbitant amount of money. So you pay maybe $1.50. Well, I don't know about in New York, in New Orleans. We pay maybe $1.50 for a little bar of Dove soap. You know, in prison, it's probably like $2.50 to $3. So your family is burdened with this cost while you're incarcerated. So I'm gonna get past the heavy stuff, but this is the last really heavy stuff. December 31st, 2008, a week and a half before I was set to be released to a federal halfway house, my biological sister from my father was murdered. So they buried her the day before I was released. So for me, going back home, I already started in like a really, really heavy place. This was also post-Katrina, and the world as I knew it was just different, right? So January 8th, 2009, I was released to the federal halfway house. So this is where my seeds of restoration started to become planted. Is there anybody in here from New Orleans? I can't see y'all back there. Hey, girl, hey. So you're gonna understand what I'm talking about. There was this place post-Katrina called Mackenzie's Donuts, right? Had the best donuts ever in the whole wide world. Y'all, I love food. These donuts are amazing, right? And then there was another place called Triangle Deli. They sold this macaroni and cheese and these big old stuffed bell peppers, like awesome. So, of course, when I get out, I want that and some boiled crawfish. Like, I had my whole menu set. I knew what I wanted. So I get out, and nothing that I knew existed anymore. Mackenzie's was gone, Triangle Deli was gone. Everything that I thought that I needed to anchor myself to society, like, no longer existed. I went in prison before the internet, got out after the internet. I thought the computers were the devil. I hated them because I didn't understand what happened. Smartphones, I just thought everything was against me, right? So January 17, 2009, my first job, I got as a hostess in a restaurant. Absolutely amazing. I was able to become a waitress, and this is where I realized that I really liked living my life through service, right? Never made that connection before, but it was a life of service that I was searching for and seeking. So I also applied to college at this time, and I was denied the right to go to college because of my conviction. So when you fill out your college application, there's a box that says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Have you ever been incarcerated? Whatever the question may be. And I had to check yes to this box. So I was denied the opportunity to be able to go to college. So just kept working, saving, got married, ended up having my son, Ethan. He'll be out here in like 2 minutes to talk to you guys. And it was just, I still wanted to go back to school. So I decided to use the same exact application, because once I got familiar with the internet and computers and stuff, I knew that I could just go in and like revise my application. I didn't have to submit a whole new one. So I pulled up the old application and I just unchecked the box. That was all I did, I promise. No new grades. Just unchecked the box and I got into school. Scholarships, everything. So for me, I was like, this is not good, because when people are released from prison, there's over 5,000 barriers that they encounter just being released from prison. It doesn't matter if you've been there 18 months or 18 years. It's over 5,000 barriers that you're faced with when you're released from prison. So I had to have a confession again and kind of accept responsibility for what I did. And I told a professor of mine what had happened with my application process. And he was like, oh my God, you're not like a regular person, coming from prison. So it kind of put me in the mindset of, like when you have, I'm gonna just use it for me, you're black and you have like 1 or 2 white friends and you're like, oh, you're not like those people, That's how I felt, right? So, and so I was like, you know what? There are so many people out there who are just like me, the most intelligent, smartest people that I've ever met in my whole entire life reside in prison, and this cannot be life, right? So I ended up going out and meeting this organization. It was called the National Council of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And we started working together. I started speaking. This was after I graduated from college, I'm sorry. As a clinical laboratory scientist, I told y'all I really like science. But this time I'm in a lab that deals with like human specimens and stuff. No explosives at all, I promise. So I basically work in hospitals, matching blood products and different things of the sort for people to sustain life, work on a transplant team and all of this. But once I was introduced to the council, I really realized that what sustained me and drove me was helping other women and girls transition into society, the same way that I had, because I was considered a success story, right? So I opened my organization. It's called Operation Restoration, and it's in New Orleans. And what we do is we focus on helping women and girls transition into society through education. But this box was still on the application, and if anybody who knows me, and I hope when y'all leave, y'all understand just a little bit about me, it's like I'm a dog with a bone. When something happens, I have to go and change it. We gotta get rid of this box, right? So I started speaking. Louisiana went through this big criminal justice reform push, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with the state of Louisiana. We incarcerate the most people in the world. So not the United States, the world. We incarcerate more people per capita than anywhere in the world in Louisiana. So just had to get that out there. And we're always the last to do anything because their big claim to fame is they just want to beat Mississippi. That's the aspiration that they have. I'm not kidding, that's the aspiration. So I began to set out and start speaking about my story and what was going on. And I happened to be standing in front of 2 representatives at one of these criminal justice reform meetings, and they were like, oh my God, I told them how I feel like women are often left out of the conversation because the incarceration rate of women has risen over 800% in the last 20 years. And the fastest growing population right now going to prison is white women, right? Because we all know we have an opioid epidemic across the nation. I don't find it too much different than the crack epidemic, that went on in the 80s and the 90s, but it was being criminalized then, and it's not now. But for me, what that said is that women are a forgotten population, and we're very special. We have unique needs, and we begin to discuss different things as it relates to women. So the representatives were standing behind me, and they were like, we need to do something about this box on the application. And I'm like, you think, And he was like, well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna draft up this legislation and we're gonna get it removed. And I was like, okay, good. And then I didn't hear from him for like a month. I got invited to speak at the state capitol. This was my first time ever going to the capitol. And that same representative happened to be standing behind me. And he was like, hey, I've been looking for you. I was like, no, you could Google me. You can Google. You weren't looking for me. Because that's another thing I'm fascinated with, y'all. Google, it's awesome. I have this fascination with Google, y'all wouldn't even understand. So let me get past Google. So now when I'm in sticky situations and people are like, oh, I'm looking for you, da-da-da-da, I'm like, no, you could just Google me. I come up, So he showed me the legislation, and me being who I am, I was like, this is horrible, absolutely horrible. Can we tear it up and rewrite it? So my partner in my organization, her name is Annie Freitas, we got to work and we rewrote the bill, and we actually got it passed last year in Louisiana. Louisiana became the first state. We're first, y'all, in something. We became first in the out of the 50 states to pass legislation as it related to removing the box off of college applications. So we're currently removing it off of private institutions, but it's off of all public applications currently. And since then, we've been able to help and successfully navigate 2 other states. And we're currently working on our 3rd state to get this legislation passed there. This legislative session, we had some success as well. We passed the Dignity Act for incarcerated women in the state of Louisiana because women were being allotted 1 roll of tissue a week. They had a limit on sanitary napkins and things of that sort while being incarcerated. So we were able to pass legislation where women, regardless of the ability to pay, has access to things that help to maintain their dignity. We also created a task force in Louisiana this legislative session to address the issues of women who are incarcerated, why they're incarcerated, sexual health, reproductive, mental health, all of these different things. And I also have been working on a national level for the First Step Act. The director of the Dignity Campaign for Cut 50, Ms. Topeka Sam, is sitting in the front row, and she and I work very closely together. So I'm currently working on helping to get the First Step Act passed in the federal system, where that will affect the lives of thousands of individuals to possibly be able to come home earlier through programming and things of that sort. So normally, this is where I'd be like, oh, I take questions. But since we don't have that, because I'm pretty sure you guys have some questions, I'll be out in the front during the break area so I can have conversations with all of you guys. So my son says he has something to tell you guys. He thinks every time I'm on the mic, he's supposed to be too. So I'm gonna let him tell you guys one little thing, then I'm gonna wrap up and move on, because I know you have a lot of other people to hear. Say hi, Ethan.
Hi. So, my name is Ethan, and we have a lot of things to do in the world, right? So, we have to business our time, but don't let people get incarcerated. Try not to let them do that to themselves, because it can be a long time, and they might not have any more time to do things.
So we should help them in the beginning, right?
Yes.
On the front end?
Yes.
Okay.
Front end.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna leave you guys with 2 of my favorite quotes. One of them that I feel like is the driving force in my life is from Miss Angela Davis, and it says, "I will no longer accept the things I cannot change. I will change the things that I cannot accept." So that's how I have started living my life, and I want all of you to know, regardless of whether you have been incarcerated, know someone who's been incarcerated, or this doesn't even, incarceration is foreign to you. I want you to know that whatever it is, that when you decide that you want to help in any way, the best way to provide restoration for anybody is being your own restoration project, right? So for me, changing my life and getting to this point was the biggest restoration project that I ever embarked upon. But the one thing that I learned through a life of service is that I could make a difference in the world just by changing myself. And then when I change myself, I can inspire others to change themselves. But it's hard work. It takes a lot. And I had a quote from a guy, Mr. Garrett Arnold, who told me that he was like, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. So you guys don't miss your opportunities, because it's disguised as work. So thank you guys for hearing me today.